going back to the 70s, the man who marked the 70s, if you like, he shaped the 70s in Ghana. And he would be a man who led the country, even though through a tumultuous military system. But the man who authored the book is in the studio. He's the CEO of the Kufuor Foundation. He's a man who served in the United Nations for 10 years. He's also been a senior governance expert and advisor to the UNDP, Tanzania, UN Mill, Liberia, co-founder of the CDD, the Center for Democratic Development. Also, he's published a dozen articles in academic journals. He's authored 5 books. This is the 5th one, including his own autobiography, My Ghanaian Odyssey, he calls it. And this is the brand new book, The Life and Times of the Head of State, General Acheampong. He joins me in studio. Professor Bafo Agyemang. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
You look well.
Well, I keep myself good.
You are refusing to age.
Well, you can't run away from natural. But I'm trying to keep fit. Yeah, thank you.
I see. Why did you decide to write about General Acheampong, a man who doesn't seem to have a good name in our historical records?
Precisely. Your point is exactly the reason why I decided to write. Supposedly, it doesn't have a good name, as you said. Nobody writes about him, officially speaking. Nobody even mentions him. So for this generation, the younger generation, the man simply did not exist.
Okay.
But if you consider the fact that he was head of state for almost 7 years, 72 to 78.
Right.
And he determined the destiny of Ghana, not just my village or his village, but the destiny of the whole country. Then even if he was the devil,
okay,
he deserves a place in our history.
I see.
So for me, I have tried to fill a historical vacuum. I'm not interested in military coup. In fact, I don't endorse military coup. After I read the book, you know that.
Right.
I will never endorse a military coup. Neither do I admire, those who undermine our democracy, thereby overthrowing it or damaging it or anything of the sort. My simple interest has been, how can we shortchange our history by omitting someone in our contemporary history who for 7 years dominated us. That was the prime objective. Then, of course, subsequently, I realized so many other things.
Did you decide to write this book on your own volition? Because I read somewhere that there's an Anthony who was an offspring of a good general who walked up to you.
Yes.
When Anthony walked up to you in your office to say, Prof, can we write a book about or document my father's life? What ran through your mind before you accepted that offer?
Johnny, when he came to me about 5.5 years ago, after he made his case, I smiled. First, I said, how did you know me? Then he said, oh, I met Dr. Kufuor at this place, this funeral, and I was telling him how I've been yearning to get a book of my dad because my dad is lost in history, said everything he wanted to say. So Dr. Kufuor suggested that I see you because he read your previous book and I think he liked it. So anyway, I smiled because it's a thought I've harbored for so long. Before even Anthony came to me. My curiosity was simply, why has this man disappeared from our history? Why? Because at times we hear recent leaders wanting to say something about some of his policies that they admire, but not having the courage to even mention his name.
And why is that?
Because, why is that? I said it in the introduction. It's simple. You see, Acheampong came into power by overthrowing the Busia government.
That's right.
And as you know, Busia's government is the antecedents of NPP.
That's right.
In fact, all the people, in fact, they say, Danko Busia
Dombo tradition.
Exactly.
So from the PPP to the UP to the NPP.
To NPP. And he cut short their political journey. And most of them suffered, by the way, because when you overthrown, even if you are not tortured, the fact that they will jail you for, put you away for months, like my own boss, former President Kufuor, he was in protective custody, Acheampong, for 13 months.
Without trial.
Without trial, nothing. That is the thing about military regimes. So today, if I hear anybody clamoring for military coup, I say, you don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, you see, so that is not the intention. But when he told me, I said, no, I like your proposal. But you know what? If I am to do it, I'm going to do it my way. Because his initial thought, I think, was to write something to commemorate the father.
Okay.
Which means I wouldn't say glorify, but at least make him look good or whatever. But I said, no. If I'm doing it, to be academic work.
Okay.
And the objective, if the chips fall and falls on him, fine. If not, whatever. And that's
exactly what you did. And
yes.
I must commend you for the detail which you put in. I like the fact that you also footnote most of the narrations with deep historical analysis and to run us through some of the lessons that, if you will, are missing from social studies and all. But let's trace the man's genealogy. Yao Adom. That's his great-grandfather, the hunter and the warrior.
That's right.
Who had occasion to go into a forest where animals and beasts were antagonizing the people.
That's right.
He had the authority of the king or the chief at the time to go. He murdered them.
That's right.
And then he came back, he was given a portion of land.
That's right.
And he started his life.
Right.
He had a lineage that comes through until John Kutu, which is Acheampong's father. Acheampong was also, if you like, after his father adopted the Catholic religion.
Yes.
Okay, adopted and gave his son the name Ignatius after the great founder of the Jesus, who was also a soldier.
That's right.
In all of these gallant footnotes and steps, did you get an inclination that Acheampong was destined to be a soldier?
Interesting point. But you see, there's another story that you could have added about his father's phobia for the military.
Exactly, because of the sordid event they had with the Sagranti War.
Exactly.
His grandfather.
Exactly.
And all of that.
But you also may be right that maybe he was destined to be a soldier, but because if you look at his background, as you have very well articulated, he comes from that kind of background. But all the same, after his grandfather's experience in the Sagranti War, then on the lineage, really went into the military. Until he met this guy friend, Kakari, from his hometown, who had joined the military, the medical corps of the military.
It was a corporal.
A corporal.
Yes.
He was really the one who influenced Acheampong to join the military, because he liked the outlook of the guy. He came out smart and everything. Then, of course, the guy also told him how great it was to be in the military, serving your nation, but well compensated at the time and all. That really brought him into the military.
But his father was in disagreement.
Yes.
And even though he had not mentioned to his father that, look, I want to join the military because he knew what was at home.
That's right.
He had gone in to try and get in.
That's right.
He spent the night in a sergeant's room after the sergeant had, questioned him, what are you doing here?
That's right.
And by morning, he had woken up to heat water, clean, and all of that. Let's get into that story. This sergeant, Techi Menson, he had to go back with the Acheampong to his father.
Yes.
To appeal to his father. Let's run a bit of that story.
Another fascinating point. You see, because of the family's experience in the Sagranti War, the father has sworn never to allow his children to be in the army, his sons.
Okay.
Now, here was Acheampong who got fascinated and went to the barrack to be enlisted without the knowledge of his father. He thought he had accomplished such a big feat, so he was going home to tell the whole family that, hey, I'm now a soldier, I'm at the barracks, only to meet the disappointment of the father. You cannot break my vow. So Acheampong went back to the barrack. That's when he brought his drill sergeant or whatever to come with him, hoping that the presence of this man could convince the father to allow him. But as you know, the father agreed reluctantly.
Okay.
And again, the sad story, at the end of that chapter, you notice that after he approved Acheampong's enlistment, the man wept fasted or avoided food for weeks,
Right.
crying that he may never get his son back alive. Very fascinating story.
Of the book, where his father had occasion to summon his children to say, look, my finances are not looking good.
That's right.
So out of the three of you, somebody must drop out of school so that the rest can continue. Right. Victoria opted to drop out because she had taken the role of a mother.
That's right.
After the demise of Acheampong's mother.
That's correct.
The other brother, John, also said, look, I think Acheampong is brighter than all of us. He has much more prospects.
Right.
And he should go.
That's right.
I felt that was touching.
Very touching indeed. And by the way, these two siblings are alive.
They are?
Yes,
Oh,
Victoria
okay.
is like 93 or so. I interviewed her.
I see. Yes, I noticed that in the book.
And John also alive. So they were great siblings. So presumably, in fact, that's I get the picture I have with
Right.
Madame Faustina, Acheampong on the right, and Acheampong's older sibling,
Okay.
Victoria. Because as John said, Acheampong was brighter. Also, he was older, older than John Tar. And through the interviews, this came out very strongly. And when you think of it, in a way, like you said earlier, maybe he was destined to be something. Because the fact that amongst the three, he was the one, the siblings agreed that, no, you should take advantage of schooling because the father cannot put all of us through. So these two people did not go to school, they were dropped out.
I see. Training teacher.
Yes.
He started off as a pupil teacher.
People
Training
went
teacher.
to school,
Enlisted, got into the army.
yes.
Something that's striking, which is akin to what my father went through. So he passed the examination. He rose through the ranks from Lance Corporal in 1955, after joining in 1953, to Corporal in August the following year. That's unusual. And then he was promoted to Second Lieutenant in May 1957. That's also unusual. Back to back. At least it takes 4 years intervals to get to a different rank. What was this blessing about?
I have to know that he did not determine these promotions. He was just promoted by the school, a very strong background. So in those days, very few would go in for the officer training.
Right.
Because they have gone to the university of the done sixth form. But Acheampong did not do that. He went to finish elementary school, was a people teacher, went to this Agnes Wade School of Commerce or Business, and then taught briefly, then worked for the Ministry of Education as a secretary in Sunyani, then came to Kumasi to work for a sawmill, accountant and secretary, and then joined the army. So he entered, that's why when he joined the army, they asked him to teach at the Bemakam
School. Right.
And whilst teaching there, he studied
For
privately.
his A-level.
Exactly. So the guy was self-taught in so many ways, and he was brilliant. So these promotions you were talking about, I was fascinated myself because I know a little bit about. So
Right.
I know
Because that's what your PhD in that area.
security,
literally,
military, yeah, that's right. You see, so it's very fascinating that he went through that. And there's an interesting story about him that I believe you have also read, or maybe I'm jumping the gun.
Which is?
He's finishing the ROSTS.
Right. Right. And then not getting in, then Dr. Nkrumah had to intervene.
Yes.
Is that why he has a certain kind of affinity in terms of his policies to that of Dr.
His
Nkrumah?
ideology.
Is it?
Yes.
Is he trying to say thank you to Dr. Nkrumah through that?
No, so many things impressed him about Nkrumah, more than that one. But certainly, I think he owed Nkrumah a debt of gratitude for really saving his career.
Okay.
Because without Nkrumah's intervention, he may have been kicked out of the
There was also an emotional part in the book, page 2930, when they returned from the course abroad in the UK and the US, I must say, from Kansas. Mrs. Statesmen and Statesmen's mother, who was also his colleague, the scenario of the boiled egg, which was very symbolic at the time for your mother to come and meet you at the airport.
Symbolic with the guns, right?
Right.
Exactly.
It is also.
That's what I got.
And why was he thinking at some point that nobody would come, even though everybody knew that his mother had left? But his big sister was there. Victoria was playing the motherly role.
But so Acheampong had now left the family. Victoria was back in their hometown. So nobody was there to do. I mean, he didn't expect anyone to come to the airport. His bond with the Manson was just till death. They were really bonded by that.
Page 38 of the book gives me an indication of a man who loves his country more than his family. So it says, the last paragraph, Acheampong returned to Ghana in November 1962 from his second assignment with the United Nations. Meanwhile, the frequent travels and distance took a heavy toll on his young family. Each time he traveled, Comfort Adjoasa had to take herself and the children back to Acheampong. In the process, Acheampong and Comfort drifted apart. The two therefore reached a music where they performed. So he divorced Comfort and got to Faustina.
Yes.
In the interest of the country.
I wouldn't say that. I don't know what motivates a man to divorce one and marry another one. But you see,
it seemed to be, the narrative here gives me an impression he seemed to be more interested in his soldiering job.
Exactly. That affected his marriage. No doubt at all about it. But when he connected Faustina, I thought
exactly. But he was more interested in
serving the nation. Exactly, because he was going to go back into service in the Congo. And you see, when I say they drifted apart, all I mean is that when a man and woman separate for so long, all kinds of things happen, all kinds of issues emerge, and that affected the love. And so they mutually agreed that at this point, it's better we just...
He's also noted for his love and joy for agric.
Very much.
And it comes from his training at Kansas State, United States Command Staff College.
That's right.
Where he would ride and see, if you like, a host of farm fields. Yes. And he was amazed that out of the 220 million population of the U.S. at the time,
that's right,
only 5% of them were farming, but the U.S. was self-sufficient and it was producing a lot more. Let's bring it down home. He ensured that for 2 years, we were able to export rice. Now we're talking planting for food and jobs. We are talking about not exporting food as we speak today because we need to stabilize the market and ensure that there's sufficiency.
Yeah.
Did we lose the plot at some point?
We lost something. In fact, I cite former President Mahama in his speech at Harvard where he referred, and that was the first official reference to Acheampong that I could find. In fact, he did not even mention his name. That's what he said, the of the 70s who made self-sufficient, we should perhaps go there. And in their campaign, 2016 also, I quoted Deborah, who also said that if they won, they are going to introduce Operation Feed Yourself.
That's right.
You know? So that has had some influence on Ghana and our politicians. But so far, nobody has had the courage to introduce it the way he did. You see, Acheampong's Operation Feed Yourself, what makes it so peculiar is that it wasn't a military order to citizens to go to the farm.
Okay.
It was also the period in Accra. People were doing their gardens behind their houses, planting vegetables and cocoyam and plantain in Accra, not to mention the other places.
Right.
And that's why during that period, Ghana was more than self-sufficient in food.
How do we get back on track?
How we get back on track is a serious question because, you see, unfortunately, the global trade dynamics have changed. Let me tell you something. When I've forgotten the year, there was a year, was it Obasanjo's regime or some other government?
Interestingly, he and Obasanjo went to the same school.
Correct.
It looks like their school is a school for coup plotters.
Obasanjo is coming to launch this book.
I see.
Exactly.
I see.
The book next week.
Right.
So he lost my thought.
Don't mind me. Don't mind me. Don't mind me.
I know how. You know. So this food thing you talk about how we do it. Today, it's not easy for any government in a developing world to really go against the so-called World Trade Organization treaties.
That's right.
If you stop the Chinese from bringing or exporting rice, or the Vietnamese, there could be some consequences.
Right.
All right. You remember a year or two ago, in Rwanda, the President Kagame decided to ban the importation of used clothes.
That's right. That's right.
You know the reaction of the Western, especially America. They kicked him out of the AGOA. But he persisted.
Persisted, yeah.
And now he's stuck there. Americans are back to him. So at times it requires certain courage. Because frankly, the way the global system has boxed us into a corner, it's not easy. But that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is getting ourselves mobilized for agricultural production. Okay. Because frankly, if we were able to produce enough rice, vegetable, tomato, which we now get from Burkina Faso, if we do that and it's plentiful, we will be able to compete with those that bring in those commodities. So I think it's more of a problem of increasing our production capacity than simply saying the exported or the imported items, we cannot stop it and therefore we throw them out.
Let's look at a final point before we wrap up. Aliens Compliance Order.
Yeah.
This was a tassel, if you will, like what we're seeing now. GIPC law, Guta on one side, Nuta on one side, asking people to leave the market so the locals can have full control. And the Acheampong was sad about it because he had gone to the Afao border, and pregnant people in sanitary conditions and all of that, and he would complain bitterly about it. Nothing seems to have changed.
You see, it's interesting when you look at world history or our own history, we go in cycles. We go in cycles. That's why even talking about the hardships that I know you bemoan all the time on your platform, the hardships, I'm old enough to know that even the last few years from Nkrumah, we had hardships. I remember my mother sending me to GNTC at the time to line up to buy a can of sardine or something. It started 1965, 64, 65, 66 before Mao Zedong. So the hardships is going in circles. And I think the argument should be we have to go to certain fundamentals. I've already made allusion to the fact that the World Trade Organization has boxed African countries to a corner. And it is true. The global system has simply boxed in such a way that it's difficult for us to break out of this kind of logjam, economically speaking. And until we break out of that, we will go in cycles. I'm sorry I'm being theoretical here, but that's exactly the way I feel.
That's exactly what we're where we're going to find this book? Is it out on the market yet?
No, after its launch on the 23rd.
23rd.
Of this
September.
week today,
Right.
then they will announce where they will sell them. Except in the universities, in the bookstore, the Universities Kingdom, Methodist bookstore, and possibly the Shell station at the airport.
I see.
These are possible places we can find them after Thursday next week.
Director, give me 1 minute point of interest. I saw Tinagov and Unigov. And Tinagov was a proposal which was to run for 4 years.
That's General Kufu's
proposal to run for 4 years. But of course, General Kufu is an offshoot of the Acheampong regime. Would you say that's where we got the idea of a 4-year tenure for our government since 1992?
I like the way you stretch your imagination.
And do we still have to stick with the 4-year tenure, given the fact that he did almost 7 years, Nkrumah did more than 5 years as well? And look at what they did, and look at what our 4-year tenures are doing now. What do you say from what you sit? It's a political scientist, a historian,
I'm
diplomat.
A big proponent of reviewing the Constitution.
To make it what?
Many things, decoupling power from the center, all kinds of. But directly on your point, it's part of the review that should happen. I think the 4-year tenure is not doing anything good. When President Kufuor was leaving office, he made that point, but people just, I guess, laughed at him. But the fact is, you come in, first year you are settling, second year you're beginning to find your feet, you making your programs. Third year you are consolidating your program. Fourth year you have to be mindful of the election, so you are off running for power, and your opponents are meanwhile biting on your tail.
Right.
So we don't get our planning together, we don't get implementation together, and it's bad for us.
How many numbers, how many years are you looking at?
I can look at minimum of 5 twice.
Okay.
Or 7 once.
Prof, I thank you very much indeed for your time. Our time is spent. I wish we could go on and on, but we're giving you just a clip and a taste of the man who, as I said in my intro, has been vilified. But if you have a chance to read the book, you would reorient your mind about him. Peace-loving, who loves God. He prayed on every occasion. He didn't like violence even from childhood, and he has a very soft heart. Even though those were some of the things that were used against him, particularly because if you ask for favors, he would grant you the favors for import chits. But it turned out that only what he did for women, or what was remembered. If we had time, we would have gone into the VW saga. Right. But we do not have a lot of time. Prof, thank you very much for your time. My guest has been Professor Acheampong. He is the CEO of the Kufuor Foundation. The book will be launched on the 23rd of September.